And hello, everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSP Magazine, and more specifically, the Human Centered Cybersecurity series that I'm thrilled to co host with the one and only Julie Haney. Julie, good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean.
It's been a few days since
Mm-hmm.
we've
Been a little
connected,
while.
and a lot is going on, a lot has happened, and one thing stays the same: we're all human, and we continue to be at the center of a lot of things at the business and certainly in cybersecurity. And it's important to keep us at that center because I think we need to stay sane. We need to help participate in what a secure organization is and looks like. And that doesn't happen by magic. That happens from thought and action and driven by research, which you're so kind enough to bring some amazing people to the conversation to help us understand what that research is and what the outcomes of that research can be. And so I'm going to leave it there for you, Julie, to kind of introduce this topic and our guest, and then we'll have some fun. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Great to be back. So today I'm really excited because this topic really centers around the fact that cybersecurity is for everyone, right? Regardless of where you are in life and what your background is, it is relevant to all of us. And I'm very excited to have Dr. Aunshul Rege here to talk about some of the research and the efforts that she is engaged in to bring cybersecurity to everyone. So people with all kinds of different experiences and backgrounds and perspectives. So Anshul is a professor in the Department of Criminal Justice at Temple University. She's doing some really exciting work. And when I met her, I just knew that she had a lot of good things to share with this audience and wanted to have her on the podcast. A big warm welcome to you, Anshul. Thanks for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me, Julie and Sean. I'm always excited to talk about my work, and I'm a professor, so I love to profess. So super excited to be here today.
Great. Just to start off, I know that you originally didn't start off in cybersecurity, and you've had kind of an interesting career path. Can you tell us, like, how did you land into cybersecurity?
Yeah, so actually my first degree was in computer science, and this was way back when cybersecurity wasn't even taught, not even as an elective, forget, at the core center topic. And I graduated. My first job was I was a software engineer, and I had to do quality assurance, quality control. And about a year into my job, the company that I worked for experienced a breach, and we were trying to figure things out. And that's when I first experienced what it's like being in an organizational setting where cyber attack has occurred. And I realized very quickly that I was unprepared for something like this. And that's when I started asking questions like, well, who's behind it? Why did they target us? Was it an individual? Was it an organization? And, those types of things, the things that computer science couldn't really answer because it's actually outside the disciplinary domain. And so I then said, all right, well, I think these questions would probably be better understood through liberal arts, through disciplines like criminology, sociology, or psychology. And so I quit my job, something that I thought I'd never do. I went back to school and I studied criminology, and I really liked it. I stuck with it all the way, and I did some cool projects along the way. So for my master's thesis, I looked at cybercrimes at online gambling sites, which was a lot of fun. And then for my PhD, I looked at cyber attacks against the power grid, with an emphasis on adversarial decision making. So how do they make decisions on which systems to target? How are they making decisions as they work through, as a cyber attack unfolds? So those were, sort of the educational experiences, and I really enjoyed the research side of all of it. And one place where I know I'm going to get to do that is in academia. And so that's how I ended up to where I am today. And it's been challenging in many ways, because when I started, there still really wasn't a cybersecurity department or school per se. So it's very hard to figure out where you fit. And I still think for the most part, it's still very siloed. Computer science, which isn't cybersecurity, criminology, which is also not cybersecurity. So yeah, I'm trying to work at the intersectionality of spaces and take the best of all of these worlds and experiences in my work. So yeah, so that's a little bit of the journey.
Awesome. Yeah, I love bringing those different perspectives together is so important in cybersecurity. So let's talk about some of the things that you're doing. And we'll start with your work in cybersecurity literacy and community outreach, which I think it's so important because there's so many people who aren't exposed to cybersecurity training because they don't have perhaps they don't have a job where they have that type of security awareness training. So how do they get that training in the first place? So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with cybersecurity literacy?
Yeah, so I love the research side of things as well, but the education piece is just as important, right? Be it in my classroom or sort of outside of the classroom in the community. And, I think, one of the things that we have to do as educators is also change the way that we teach. I think when I started, I taught, my classes the way I was the experience based on the experiences that I had as a student, right? So here, go read these materials, take the exams, write a paper, do a presentation, but they don't really have applied and practical value. And I also wanted to design something where I could give back to the community where Temple University is housed, and that's in Philadelphia. So this actually came about through a couple of different pathways, as is usually the case. So I was reading the 2022 digital equity plan that the city of Philadelphia had produced. And at that time, there were approximately 96,000 households in the city that didn't have broadband internet access, and a lot of them were low income residents, so they were less likely to have access to a working device. And at Temple, there's a unit called the Digital Access Center, and it's actually a workforce development center for the North Philly community. And what it does is it provides residents access to technology and help desk support and free education in the areas of digital navigation and digital literacy. So a lot of the center's clients are seniors, sometimes they're first-time computer users, and so a lot of their time is just spent on understanding the basics of using computers. And this is sort of where we kind of bring our experiences to help assist the work that the center is doing. And the students in my cybersecurity class come into the picture. So we worked with the center and we added on, if you will, to the digital literacy programming by offering a cyber hygiene curriculum. So we worked with the center and we designed a class project where students had to raise awareness about cyber hygiene. And they had to develop a 10-minute presentation on a cybersecurity topic of their choice. But sometimes the center would tell us, hey, can you really focus on these specific topics? And the presentation would just have to cover three main parts: define the topic, justify why it's relevant, and offer three clear ways to protect against or mitigate the issues or practice good cyber hygiene. And they had to do this in a way, right, that was easy to digest for the elderly population. And we started this a couple of years ago, and it's come a long way. And I think projects like this are really, really wonderful because everybody wins, right? Seniors get to learn about, for instance, the latest scams and how to keep themselves safe. And they've actually told us that they go home and share this with their family and their friends. So I love the fact that in a way they're serving as cyber ambassadors, right? Students really feel great about their work because they're giving back to the community. And from a career prep sort of perspective, they're building their presentation skills, learning how to communicate like maybe complex jargony topics, right, in an informal way, in an informal setting to an older population, while treating them with respect and dignity. So it often starts as a presentation, but it ends up becoming a conversation. And there's lots of stories and experiences that are shared both by the senior citizens and the students from my classroom. So it's really, really cool because you end up creating these shared experiences and safe and judgment-free spaces for everybody. So it's been a fun project, and it's continuing to evolve.
Sounds super cool. And the first thing I think of is, how can you scale that? It's only so many students, only so many programs, and obviously you're in the particular part of Philly. How do we do that broader scale? And I immediately go to the organizations that are doing awareness training, and so I have two thoughts here, and I want your perspective on it. So the first is, there's this awareness training, and tools are implemented. Let's say we're gonna educate you on phishing, and also we're implementing MFA, or multi-factor authentication. And the employee may or may not connect those two, but they are connected, right? So depending on how the awareness training is delivered, they might understand we're getting MFA to help combat the impacts of phishing. But without that connection, without the context, they see the tool, it inhibits their work. They see the awareness, they hopefully do things differently, don't put the organization at risk. But very seldom, in my experience, they bring that home. Very seldom do they share that with others around them, which you've been able to accomplish by the literacy part, being able to describe it in a way, make the connection, make it understandable. And so I'm wondering how your thoughts on how we can perhaps build a broader program beyond the one that you're doing, and is there a way to leverage, I don't know, cross curriculum stuff at universities, tap into the awareness training and organization? I don't know, just thoughts on all that.
Yeah. Most of the organizations, like now I'm at Temple, but even before when I was, working as a student, right, in different settings. So my exposure to training has primarily been what have academic institutions offered their employees. And it's typically once a year, an online module, and you go through it and it's a quiz, or you complete it. If you pass, that's good. Or they have the phishing simulations where if you accidentally click on something, you have to now go do some additional training. And there's, of course, those are good, but I think the way, so it's the content side of it. Of course, we want to cover those topics, and as you said, Sean, we want to make sure that folks understand the connections between these topics. But I think an equally important part is delivery, how it's delivered, how often it's delivered. What is the tone? What is the setting? How is it structured? Is it a quiz? Or is it, again, that simulation type of exercise, or is it something that's more hands-on, proactive? Is it more interactive? Is it through storytelling? I've found when it's presented in that way, it's more relatable. And we realized that this is actually a very integrated part of our everyday lives. So I think when you start doing more of that, so I think there needs to be a fundamental shift in the way training is done before we even think about scalability, right? And that requires investment, both financially, bringing in different perspectives into how to do this training. Doing a lot of research into what works and what doesn't work, getting into those metrics, and I've had endless conversations with many, many people about metrics, and Julie is the latest person that I've been speaking with about that, right? Like, what works? And so the way we know, and a lot of times, especially when you're interacting with the community, which is my audience, I cannot frame it as a research project, right? So I cannot truly measure these things because I have to worry about trust. and I want to form and maintain those relationships over time. I want them to keep coming back, bringing their friends, their families into these types of conversations. And I know that it's working because when they come back, they do bring their neighbor or they do bring their grandchildren. So we had part of this is in the classroom. Well, we also have a cybersecurity day, right? Where we just, everybody from the community comes together, and it's literally, you see generations. So you'll see grandparents, their kids who are probably my age, and then their children who are, youth, and they're all having conversations about it. So I think normalizing is also something that's really, really important. Normalizing and changing the way we talk about it, making it relatable, making it conversational. I think those types of things I've found in my context to be very effective. Now, how would that map into an organizational setting? Is there truly a desire to move towards that, right? Go into that direction? Is there going to be a financial investment in these types of things? That's a separate conversation entirely, right? What are budgets allocated for, and things like that. So I think a lot more needs to happen.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you about the delivery, the making things relatable, the building of trust, right? So coming across as credible as well.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, because I know there's been a lot of research in the past looking at generational differences when it comes to technology and cybersecurity more specifically. And I know you've worked with different populations. So you mentioned some of the seniors, and I think you've worked with youth before as well. So what would be your recommendations for how to approach these different generations to really tailor the message so that it really does hit home, so that it is relatable, so that it addresses their needs? Like, what are some of those kind of generational differences that you see, and how does that change your approach to just talking to people about cybersecurity?
Yeah, and this is, I always joke that nobody taught you, or at least when I was in grad school, nobody teaches you how to teach, right? They teach you how to do research, but they never teach you how to teach. And all of a sudden you're in academia and you have to figure out how to teach. And so I'm figuring things along as I go. And I think that's step one, just realizing that it's an evolving process dynamic, especially every time technology changes or the latest thing comes out, right? You have to be able to adapt and realize that it's never going to be perfect, right? So I want to start with that. And I mentioned some of the work that we've been doing with seniors, but we do offer separate youth programming. And again, we cater the topics, obviously, that are more appropriate for youth. And again, we listen to our partners. So one of our partners, for instance, is the Juvenile Justice Center of Philadelphia, and they offer an assortment of programming, one of which is ours, right, to at-risk youth, right? And so they come and say, oh my gosh, we've got a lot of our youth are, the latest thing we're seeing is sexting, and this is huge. Can you talk about it? And it's a very difficult topic to talk about, right? So how do we talk about this in a safe way, in a fun way, because you have to keep them engaged, but you also have to get them to talk about this, right? And it's uncomfortable sometimes. So so that's been like a topic. Online gaming is another one that, our partners have said, can you please talk about that? Deep fakes and disinformation, right? So yes, in terms of the content, of course, it's different. But in terms of, and again, this is anecdotal, right? And again, I can't really do research when it comes to this, because for me, trust and long-term partnerships take precedence over the metrics in this case, right? So what I've found, what my team has found, is seniors are more likely to be cautious about technology, but they don't necessarily have the most up-to-date information on the current threats or trends. And a lot of times they may feel overwhelmed by all of this information, especially around security, as if it sounds too complex or if it disrupts the functionality that's offered by that technology, right? So you have to think about those types of things. Whereas with the youth, it's been almost like at the other end of the continuum. So they're very tech savvy, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're cybersecurity savvy, right? So they do have a lot more comfort and familiarity with technology, but they may be overconfident because of that, right? And so they may engage in more risk taking behaviors. They may prioritize speed and convenience over safety. So I think that's sort of what we've been seeing in terms of these two groups. But in terms of communication, right, there's again, how do we deliver content? We found some differences. So for seniors, again, being super clear, jargon free, using visual aids, trust building, right? So again, this is why we partner with the Digital Access Center, right? You need to find entities that have those partnerships with the community and sort of jump on, right? Because they've established the trust and we benefit from that. For the youth, we've had to do lots and lots and lots of hands-on activities, right? So it's very much, it's almost like solving puzzles or solving mysteries and those types of things. But, right, so these are two very different demographics, but for both populations, there's a lot of similarities in terms of how we offer the programming. So again, for both, we want to create safe, judgment-free spaces, use informal conversation through lots of, again, storytelling and hands-on activities, not use fear-based approaches for both groups, but framing it as a way to protect their independence, their reputation. That's been like, it's almost like, as opposed to fear, let's empower, right? So shifting the way it is, again, the tone, the messaging of it. Hearing the needs and experiences of the community and tailoring the content accordingly, right? It's very easy for us every semester. I could just be like, yep, we have these set slides. Here you go. We're going to do this. But the Access Center will tell us, hey, can you really help us do this? Or there was, when we went out into the hunting park community, they wanted something specific for their community residents. So again, listening and tailoring. And it takes more time, but it's definitely the way to go. And that helps build those trust relationships. I think what I've been doing, and again, just like I said, they don't teach you how to teach. They also don't teach you how to engage with community, right? So I've found that having getting community outreach and engagement training is important. So in my classes, I dedicate 2 classes where I bring in experts specifically on this, right, to talk with my students about this. So how do you design the content? How do you pick examples? How do you deliver the presentation? How do you have meaningful and thoughtful conversations? So learning not just how to present, but present with community in mind. And the last thing I'll say on this is I'm not a fan of phrases such as you can't patch stupid or the human is the weakest link, because I do think the human is our strongest asset. And we really need to normalize cybersecurity conversations and do this early, right? So being mindful of tone, not framing ourselves as the experts, but rather immersing ourselves into conversations and truly being present and meeting people where they are. So I think those are some of the things, regardless of the demographics that you're dealing with, that you want to bring to the table.
Oh, such good stuff. And you've mentioned metrics a couple times, and so I'm gonna say this. I think you can only measure something that you can see,
Yes.
and hopefully you're measuring it in the context of what you want to achieve. Because you can measure a bunch of things in different ways, and it doesn't really mean you're going to get out of it or find the answer that you that you want. So how do you define what success looks like, and how do you measure that? Because I think this is generalizing, but I think a lot of the awareness training in organizations is measured by how many employees didn't click, or how many employees did the test, or how many employees whatever. And it's very tech driven, very action driven, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they caught on, doesn't mean that they embraced it, doesn't mean that it actually impacts or reflects in the security program or the business outcomes overall. So obviously you're not inside the organization, but I think a lot of what you do can be applied to an organization based on the research you do. So any thoughts on defining success, measuring success?
Yeah. So from a student perspective, one of the things we do, let's say with the community outreach projects, is I get students to write reflections, right, about what they got out of it. And you can ask specific questions too, and it's not necessarily a quantifying metric, but a qualifying, right? So it's more qualitative data. But what did you get out of it? And one of the biggest things that has always come out ever since we've started looking at the reflection pieces, I really had to know my stuff for me to be able to go teach it to somebody else, right? And so I can give them the content, I can quiz them on it, and that's one thing. But when you are in the position of being responsible to now give that information to somebody else, right? So in a way, they're taking on my role. So they really have to know the material inside out, and they themselves are now doing the research to be able to handle, any questions that they may get asked, things along those lines. So I think centering the human, in this case, my student, right, where it's they have to now really know their material. So that's been one way of, for me, assessing, are they really getting it, right? So not just understanding it, but also delivering it. And through that, then, they've come and said, because I've met some of my students later on, and they've come and said, hey, I still have conversations with people, I still tell them, be careful what you do, you could get shoulder surfed or you could get this, right? So that's been sort of one way of measuring that in my setting. The other issue that we have, which is not going to be in an organizational setting, not necessarily, is the turnover rate, right? So students take my class one semester and then they're gone. They never have to see me again for that class or do that project or anything like that. So is the metric that I've used, or how do I know that they've retained information? I don't really have a way of measuring that, right? But I know, like, right, in the few cases where they come back and tell me that, or when I see are the elderly folks bringing their friends, or when they, or the students who've taken our youth programming, they go and tell other youth at the juvenile justice center, hey, next time this is offered, you should totally do it, right? So it may not necessarily be an indication of what did I learn? But at least there's the hook that gets them intrigued and they want to know more about it. And that to me is a good starting point. Or when we have celebration ceremonies for either the seniors or the youth and their families come, you can hear through the buzz, right? Where it's like, oh, yeah, I remember when you guys covered this information. And then my son came home and we were having a giant conversation at dinner time about this, right? So to me, those few instances do demonstrate that something is working. And for me, even if it's just a conversation about it, that's a win for me. So that's how I, again, have looked at it as not, maybe not necessarily a success per se, but certainly, moving in that direction, right? Like where we're normalizing having conversations about cybersecurity.
Awesome. Great stuff. So I want to change gears a little bit, because I really want to get to some of the work that you've done with your social engineering cybersecurity competitions, because I think it's so interesting. And we mentioned before when you were telling us about your background, how cybersecurity is very interdisciplinary, right? And I think sometimes that folks coming from other disciplines have a difficult time seeing themselves in cybersecurity, because it's so tech focused. And I know you've been working on these competitions as a way to bring in students who are not in kind of the, quote unquote traditional cybersecurity fields, into cybersecurity, so that they get more of that experience. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. And I think Julie had mentioned this before, and Sean, you've mentioned this too. Is I think the way I've looked at it now, cybersecurity is no longer optional, right? And it's not going to only be something that matters to students or working professionals in the tech fields. It's going to target everybody. Like this is cyber attacks can target anyone. And so I think this gets into just a basic understanding of this, especially and what makes it relatable, at least like a stepping stone, if you will, or the bridge that connects cybersecurity to all these other domains, right? The way to make it relatable is through, I've found anyways, one of the ways to do this is through that social engineering work that we've been doing. And we look at diversity in a couple of different ways here, right? So it's diversity in terms of the theme of the competition every year. So we do run international competitions virtually every year. We just finished year 5, which was amazing, and the competition is open to high school, undergraduate, and graduate students from all over the world. And so we have a different theme every year to demonstrate the various ways that social engineering can manifest, right? So in our first year, for instance, we had it was just a classic social engineering penetration test. The second year, we had students pose as ransomware negotiators when my lab, this is all hypothetical, of course, right, or simulated, I should say, when my lab was subjected to a ransomware attack. So now students had to come and play the role of a negotiator, which is an actual role, right? And social engineering comes into that space. So it's a very different sort of way of demonstrating how it might occur. Then the year after that, we had romance scams in social engineering. So they had to interface with a potential victim, and the victim was talking to a potential scammer. And so they had to figure out, well, is this really a scam? And how do we let the victim know this while demonstrating tactical empathy, right? So again, a different way of looking at social engineering. Last year, we looked at employment scams and social engineering, and this is something that's actually impacting a lot of young adults in general who are coming out for the first time with their degrees and they're looking for jobs, right? So we centered it around the young adult demographic. And just this past year, we did critical infrastructure and social engineering. So it was a transportation company that was the target. And students had to do a social engineering penetration test on that. And so this is also the first year that we brought AI into the mix, right? So students had to use AI to understand how cyber criminals are using AI to really polish their social engineering campaigns, to increase the scale and scope of their campaigns, right? So getting, again, students to think about this. So what we do through these is look at different themes to get students to understand that cybersecurity and social engineering looks different in different settings, that it's not just something that bad folks do, right? When they're sending those phish campaigns or trying to phish you, but it's also something that defenders can use as a defense mechanism, right? So how can you use social engineering back against your attacker, right? And also then how do you demonstrate that when you are engaging with potential victims? So it's diversity in terms of the theme and how it manifests, and understanding adversarial, defender, and end user victimization, those types of components. But then there's also diversity in terms of disciplines. Now, when I had started creating these competitions, it came from a space where I was envious of the hard sciences, or the computer science folks who had the CTFs that they've been doing for years. And I said, what would that look like in liberal arts? Because we don't really have anything that is just as fast-paced or dynamic. And that's where this came from. So it was something that I wanted to do for liberal arts students. But surprisingly, our biggest student base has actually been from computer science and cybersecurity. But we do have students from business, liberal arts, of course, media and communication was an interesting one that we've seen. My personal favorites, theater, music, and performing arts, who are actually very talented social engineers. But we've also seen students from nursing and medicine consider our events, right? So there's this recognition, because of the various themes that we've had, that people are starting to realize, hey, maybe I can get into this, or I understand this. Oh, it's romance scams. That targeted my friend, or it targeted my grandma because she's lonely, right? So these types of things become, again, more relatable, more everyday, and that also is part of the draw, right, from different disciplines who have considered our competition. It's also the cost of entry in terms of skill sets is zero, right? So you don't need to know how to code. You don't need to know networks. You need to know how to talk to people, right? You have experienced phishing, so it's something that you can understand, right? So that's the relatability that I was talking about. How do you make the event itself relatable, understandable, easy to comprehend, so that you draw the audience in, and get them to think about ways that I can do this too. And that's what we've been trying to do.
And I know, Julie, you have the the point on the new program that Aunshul, the university is launching, correct? And it's not just a bachelor's in cybersecurity. What's it? It's a yeah, Bachelor of Arts, Cybersecurity, and Human Behavior, which is exciting to me. I mean, I think every university should have a cyber program. Yours includes the human behavior part of it. What what does that mean? How does that shape what the program is? Who joins the courses, and what they get out of it at the end beyond a traditional cyber only program?
Right. And Sean, you hit it right there, right? It's the human behavior piece. And that's to start sending the message that liberal arts does play a role and actually has a lot to offer. So when we were deciding to create this program, one of the things, and I sat down, with the College of Liberal Arts and the deans and all of that, it was a lot of fun, but we wanted to bring those quintessential liberal arts skills and expertise to cybersecurity. So classic skill sets, right? Like critical thinking, problem solving, conducting research, communication, creativity, thinking outside the box, right? All of those types of things. How can you bring that into this world of cybersecurity? And so, so we have some new classes, and some of them, again, based on my own sort of experiences with the social engineering competition or the community work that we're doing. These are now actual classes, which are really, really cool, right? So there's a class on social engineering. There's a required class on community engagement, where students are going to have to rotate, right? So 1 month they might do programming for the elderly. The next month they're doing programming for youth. The next month they're doing programming for local small businesses and nonprofits, right? So again, these are the different demographics that you have to be able to communicate with. Classes on ethics and AI, surveillance and privacy, right? Cyber politics. So these are just some of the courses. And for at least the courses that I'm going to be responsible for, I'm actually borrowing the trade school mindset. And by that, I mean the first 1/3 is just about understanding the concepts, right? But the majority of the class is in applying those concepts. So through practical hands-on projects. So social engineering penetration tests, right? Community outreach and engagement, developing a governance risk compliance assessment for a local community organization. So not only would students learn through the application, but these actually become line items on their resumes. They will have concrete deliverables, right? Like a pen test report or a community training and awareness presentation slide deck or a GRC assessment document. These become actual deliverables that they can present to potential employers. So it's really training them to apply the concepts, to produce deliverables. And of course, we're baking into each of these the nice frameworks, the cybersecurity framework, TKS, right? The tasks, knowledge, and skills, while we're designing the assignments. So again, it's built from the core outwards in a way that it's practical, has application value, is meaningful, and gets our students ready for the workforce.
Oh gosh, that is really exciting. It almost makes me wish I was young enough to go back and get another bachelor's degree. Yeah. So I mean, this has been fascinating, Anshul. Thanks so much for sharing the work that you've been doing. So really, the last question for you is, what are the last thoughts you want to leave with the audience? About how they can take kind of this more holistic approach to cybersecurity and really engage everyone in cybersecurity so that they see their place and their responsibility in that.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things, right? So I want cybersecurity awareness to move from being reactive or punitive to being more proactive, and where again humans are viewed as assets, right, not vulnerabilities. So I think building trust, even in your employees, so that they feel comfortable reporting things or asking questions without fear. And of course, that's not possible in all environments, depending on the nature of the work. But if it is possible, shifting that mindset, I think, is important. I don't think security should feel like an extra burden or a checklist item, right? It's not just performative. It's the messaging has to be that this is part of our daily tasks. It is, again, that no longer optional. It fits naturally into your work environment. And I think when you start doing that, it's more likely to stick with people. Just realizing that, again, it's a human, right? We are shaped by habits, social norms, incentives, cognitive biases. So are we really bringing in psychology and social sciences and liberal arts, right, into these conversations, and designing programs that are not just those once a year training or those click, and go get training. So my hope, again, as an educator, but also as a liberal arts faculty, is I would love to see students from liberal arts fields bring their unique perspectives in these types of areas. So I'd love to see more internships and early career roles for students who have just graduated, right? And start, again, embracing these fields, as opposed to saying, oh, you don't have this certification, sorry, you can't get the job, because you may not necessarily need the certification for that kind of stuff, right? So just recognizing these different skill sets, welcoming these and valuing these and integrating these into existing structures, into your work environments, I think would be a wonderful message to send to the next generation.
So cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again, Anshul. I mean, that's great advice. There's been lots of great tidbits throughout that I hope our audience takes to heart. And I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
I mean, I'm so appreciative for you to join us here and share all the cool things you're working. I want to work on stuff like that too. It sounds fun. And
you're always welcome to join us.
All right, I'll see if that's possible. That could be good. And Julie, you're amazing as always to bring really cool people to the show and shed some light on this important part of keeping the human in the center of cybersecurity and understanding behavior and trying to achieve the outcomes we want with the human right there in the middle. And so I'm always thrilled to have these conversations, and Anshul, I'm thankful for you joining us. Julie, good to have you on again. Hopefully it won't be so many days between now and the next one. And everybody listening, I'm sure you're thinking about how this might impact you and maybe some changes you might make in your personal life, perhaps in your career if you're a security leader or a practitioner listening. Many of you are. Perhaps this has a way for you to think differently about your own security awareness programs or broader security programs as well, where the human is at the center. And I think the call to action here is universities do more, like Anshul's doing, and Temple is doing, and Temple keep up the good work, continue to expand, and everybody listening contribute to the community so that those things can actually succeed on a broader scale. So with that, I will say thank you all again, and appreciate you all joining. Do subscribe and share, connect with Julie and Anshul, and we'll see you all on the next Redefining Cybersecurity and Human-Centered Cybersecurity sub-series here on ITSP Magazine.